Welcome to Wrestling with Heart, a podcast looking at pro wrestlers giving back to their community. Join me, Stanley Carr, as I interview wrestling's hottest names who use their platforms as entertainers to raise awareness and do community service. Hello and welcome to another edition of Wrestling with Heart. This is the show where we talk with professional wrestlers and professional wrestling personalities about their lives in and outside of the ring, as well as doing acts of charity work, community service, volunteering, and spreading positivity. We're always about the positive vibes here on the show, and with me right now, I've got a very special guest. He is a podcast host, radio DJ, radio host, has been a wrestling announcer across the state of Tennessee, worked in a variety of different promotions across the country. I'm pleased to welcome the one, the only, Aaron Camaro. Welcome, Aaron, to Wrestling with Heart.
Stan the man. It's finally good to be on here with you. You reached out to me because you met my friend Tracy Andrews, the lady that hosts the Rockin' Pod. And, as soon as you dropped her name and told me you do a wrestling podcast, I said, man, I'm all in. Let's get together and let's talk.
I love it. It's awesome. So let's talk about you and your childhood and upbringing. Where are you from?
I'm from a small town in north central Wisconsin called Merrill. And it's a small place. I grew up there my whole life. Went to school there, had all my old friends are there. I wasn't the best student. I had classes that I loved. So my report card would come home and it would say D minus, D minus, A plus, D minus, D minus, A plus, D minus, So my parents would say, what is going on here? How is it you're able to get A's in these classes, but you're barely squeaking by in these other ones? And I'd say, well, I get A plus in journalism because I really like the class and it's really interesting to me. And I get an A plus in art because I love to create stuff, And so they said, wow, you're a weird kid. But it was all about what interested me. And I had an opportunity to go to college for art. But at the time, I was a young kid. I was playing in bands, thought I was going to be a rock star, had no idea that some record executive was never going to show up in a small town in the middle of Wisconsin to sign the next undiscovered Guns N' Roses or Metallica or Motley Crue or the bands we emulated. And so my whole life, people would tell me, the things you really like are stupid. You are never going to be involved in pro wrestling. You're never going to be a radio DJ. You're never going to do these fanciful things that you dream of. You're just a small town kid. But all these years later, all my aunts and uncles, now they look at me and they go, wow. All my old friends, they look at me and they go, wow, you really did get to do all that stuff. And I said, it was just something, all these things that I love so much, I pursued them. And found a way to get involved and found a way to be able to do these things. And so pro wrestling was one of those things. My dad would never miss the opportunity to tell me, hey, that stuff's fake. I don't know why you like it, and this was back in the 80s. And so I'd say, I don't know, I just like it, because I was a little Kiss fan. I love the band Kiss, probably the most over-the-top band there has ever been. And I love things like Star Wars, and I love Batman comic books, and I like sports. I like football, the Green Bay Packers, and pro wrestling kind of combined all those things together. And I said, boy, I love all this other stuff, but that one thing is all of that wrapped up into one. And when my dad would tell me, and I always tell this story, he always told me one time, hey, let me tell you something. If I take the honky tonk man over into the corner and I punch him in the face 10 times, guess what? The fight's over. And I thought about that, and I was like, man, there's something to what he's saying here. But all that did was make me that much more interested. So if that's what this is, how does it work? And who decides who wins? Who decides who loses? And so I started buying all the wrestling magazines and just trying to learn as much about it as I could. And so I was always kind of a black sheep. I was an outsider. My dreams were bigger than anyone but myself could ever imagine. But like I said, I pursued it, and that made all the difference.
And I think your story is very inspirational because, when you're in school, you're learning all these different subjects, it sometimes can be very difficult to get through them. Not everybody is, a fan of going to school and learning unless you're learning something that you love. And once you get into something like art, um, it inspires you to create certain things, and it's kind of like building blocks to something else, something, other things. And it just opens up the door to a variety of different outlets. And so music, uh, radio, podcasting, and of course wrestling. I mean, there's just so many opportunities. All that is just amazing to see how you were to take those things that you learned early on and just create something really special. So that's so cool. So how did you get involved with radio? When did that start?
So when I was a kid, I used to listen to the rock DJs, and they'd play my favorite bands. And I think these guys are so cool. And you just imagine, what that guy must be like that's telling you, that was Metallica. And up next, we've got Kiss, and you just look at those guys and listen to them and go, wow, so cool. For me, after I got out of high school, I was kind of directionless. I really didn't know what I was going to do with myself. I kind of started to come to the realization that the things everyone was telling me that, a kid from a small town is not going to get to do those things was kind of starting to become true. And then one day I heard an ad on the radio saying they were looking for radio announcers. And this was the radio station that I'd always listened to, the local rock station. It was called Z104. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to go apply for that job. So I go to the radio station and I go in and they say, can I help you? And I said, yeah, I'm here to apply for the job. I heard about it on the air. And I said, what do I need to do? And they said, fill out this application and make a tape. And I'm so naive to everything. I have no idea. I'm like, a tape of what? And they're like, yourself reading something? And I go, oh, yeah. Okay. All right. No problem. Out the door I go. So I'm driving home and I'm thinking, what am I going to read? What am I going to read? This is a rock and roll station. I got to find something that's going to fit. So I stopped by the grocery store on the way home and I grabbed a magazine. And in that magazine, they had an article about Ozzy Osbourne. And so I went home and I recorded myself reading the article about Ozzy. And when I got done, I went back and I hit play and I listened to it. I said, that's not too bad. That actually sounds pretty good. So now I'm excited. So I don't wait a day or two. I go immediately. I go right back to my car, jump back in. I fill out the application, got the tape, go right back. So it's been like maybe an hour and a half. And here I am. I'm back. Here's my application, my tape. So the guy looks at me, he goes, okay, and he takes my tape and he goes up the stairs and goes into his office. In the meantime, I'm sitting there watching a guy named Nick Summers, and he was the man on Central Wisconsin rock radio. And he was the dude, like if there was a debut song, a new song by your favorite band coming out, you're going to hear it on his show. And I'm watching him do his thing. And I'm like, man, soak it in because you're about to be exposed as a fraud. I never went to school. I didn't know nothing about broadcasting. And that guy came back down the stairs. He was like, I'll be damned. Your tape sounds really good. When can you start? I was like, wow, really? I can start right now. And he goes, well, we got to fill out W-2s and all that stuff. But, I can start showing you how the boards work and, what different things are in here. And so I hung out with a guy named Dave Casey that afternoon. He just kind of showed me everything. And then I started the job. But the job wasn't to be on the rock radio. It was to be on a little local station that did news and information, gave the local high school scores, obituaries.
Small station.
Yeah, it's a small town. And so that's where I learned how to operate everything and how to speak onto the microphone, which that was one thing that I think I had going for me was the fact that I wasn't afraid. Over the years, I've seen a lot of people in different, formats of entertainment. When the little red light comes on the camera or the light comes on that says on the air, they freeze up, they get scared. Not everybody can do what you and I do, Stanley, as far as sitting down and getting in front of a microphone and not being afraid and not overthinking what you're going to do. You
Exactly.
just do it and you hope for the best. And 9 times out of 10, it turns out great. And so after a little while of doing the little local station, I finally got my opportunity on the rock station. And that's really where I belonged.
And I think too, the other thing is the more practice you get, the better you'll sound. Years of doing it, and I think it's cool. When you start off at the smaller stations, that's when you really start. You make your mistakes, you make your goofs, but over time, the more you get into it, you feel more comfortable. You get more comfortable with your sound and in your style. You start really creating a repertoire that will start evolving
Sure.
and people will start recognizing it, and that's your sound, and that's what people will remember.
Yeah, 100%. If you can, and it goes to you, whatever your community is, whatever your audience is, whether it's in the ring in front of 5,000 fans that love pro wrestling, or a podcast that's getting downloaded a million times this next week, or a community of old folks in an old folks home that's right next to the radio station. You're playing the Barry Manilow and that type of music for, but giving them the local news and information and the stuff that's important to them. And then the rock station where you're everybody's friend. They're
Exactly.
the life of the party, because you always thought, there's parties going on and I'm there, so I'm in charge of playing the great music and making sure my friends are all out there having a good time. So it doesn't matter what your community is or your audience. It's all a matter of connecting with them.
Exactly. And then the music background, was that something you already were doing at that time while you were in radio, or did that come later?
That was before, I look back on it now, and at the time we were young and we thought we were just the hottest thing in the world, but we were terrible. If we would have packed up and moved to Los Angeles, we'd have never made it. But I grew up in the era of MTV. And I had really cool aunts and uncles and older cousins that had great music collections that introduced me to bands like Kiss and Judas Priest and Motley Crue and all the bands that I love so much. You see, I got a huge collection of CDs behind
Hmm.
me. Music's my passion, especially rock music, whether it's the Beatles and the Stones to the Aerosmith and Ozzy and Sabbath, and all the way through the years and even to today. And that's a big part of what we do at Decibel Geek. And that's my podcast. We've been at it for a long time. We've built one heck of an audience. We realized that, in this day and age, people don't really think about rock in the same way that I did when I was young. And you're way younger than I am. But when I grew up, I mean, rock and roll and metal music was it. That was the top stuff. And over the years, rock music's kind of gotten pushed aside a little bit, as far as like what's popular and what gets played on radio and everything. And so with Decibel Geek, not only do we celebrate the legends, but we also want to tell people, hey, it's 2024. And guys your age, Stanley, are finding their cool uncle's, CD collection and listening to old good music and going, I want to play guitar. I love this stuff. And so there's bands out there that now where there's no MTV and rock radio just plays the same stuff over and over again. And these young bands aren't really given much of a chance. And we take a lot of pride in giving young guys creating great rock music a platform to be heard and to keep
Yes.
it alive. That's our whole thing. And we've got so many people all over the world, in the craziest places where you'd never expect to get downloads. Wow, there's 50 some people listening to us in Indonesia, so it's cool to know that all over the world there's a lot of people that still love rock. And even though it's not mainstream media anymore, it's kind of went back underground a little bit, and that sort of makes it cool too.
When did you start doing the Decibel Geek podcast?
Started doing that in about 2011. So
Okay.
when I heard about this, it's a funny story and I tell it all the time, but I'll tell it to you real quick. I was looking for a real job. I'm on Craigslist, and my wife and I had just moved. I'm looking for a job a little bit closer to the house, and this thing comes up. And it's got a list of all my favorite bands. It says it's like a radio show, but it's a podcast. And I don't really understand what a podcast is at that point. We're talking 2011. And so I respond to it, and the guy says, "It's myself. I want to be a co-host, and I got a producer. Why don't you come meet us?" And I said, "Okay." And they were like maybe 5 miles away from my house. So I jump in the car, I cruise over there. I'm thinking it's a job interview, So I come up with my game face on like it's a job interview, but it's somebody's house. And so I go, okay, this is weird. So I go up and knock on the door, and it's two dudes, and they sit down and they explain to me, and I go, well, what is a podcast? And they said, well, it's like a radio show, but it's on demand. You can listen to it whenever you want. You could listen to one if it's 10 years in the future, you can listen to one from now, or people don't have to be at a certain place at a certain time. They can listen to it at their convenience. And back then, it was kind of Wild West. You could get away with a lot more back then with podcasting, especially when it comes to playing music. So I said, so it's like a radio show, but we could do and say and play whatever we want to. And he said, yeah. I said, man, that sounds amazing. How much does this job pay? And they looked at each other and they looked at me and go, well, I mean, it's kind of a hobby. It doesn't pay anything. And I was like, oh, because I was hoping it was a job, it was going to be a paying thing. I said, well, it sounds pretty cool. Let's give it a shot. And I'll always remember high-fiving my co-host Chris when we got 50 listeners. And, just like little by little, like rock stars would start coming on the show and letting us talk to them. And then pretty soon it's more and more. And then pretty soon we're building a reputation for ourselves as being a really good rock podcast. And we're getting really good feedback and a whole lot of downloads. And to the point now where, like I said, 600th episode. I mean, if we got 50 downloads today, I'd go, what happened?
Yeah.
We got sponsors that pay us to put commercials on. We got people wanting to buy Decibel Geek t-shirts. And, it's just kind of blown up into this thing where, like I said, when it started, it was, what is a podcast? Can we make any money doing it? But it sounds like fun. Let's go for it, and we did, so it started out as really nothing. And then it grew to be this amazing thing.
Yes. Who's been like your favorite guest that you've had on so far?
Without a doubt. And we've had a lot of really great ones. And it's a lot of people that I grew up listening to their albums, listening to their music. But for me, I'm a huge fan of Ace Frehley, the original guitar player, the spaceman in Kiss. Huge fan of that guy. Always have been for as long as I can remember. And I guess it's been probably about 4 months ago now, but somebody came to us and said, do you want Ace Frehley on the show? And we're like, yeah. And he came on, and he was funny and he was fun. And people came back to us and said, that's the best interview Ace Frehley's given in years. And it was just such a thrill to talk to him. It's like, man, that guy's my rock and roll hero. And I'm looking at him on the screen just the same way I'm looking at you. And the whole time we're doing it, I'm just like, I can't even believe this is real. This is amazing. That's my favorite.
I mean, getting to talk to your heroes is just a thrill and seems like such a special treat. Definitely something that, is just a joy to be able to do that. Something that, you're a part of or you created. Getting to do that is just an amazing feeling. So that's so cool that you got to interview him. But let's kind of talk about wrestling. That's why we're all, people that are listening to this want to know about your wrestling career, how you got, started. You talked about it earlier with, watching it as a kid, getting the magazines. Talk to me about your journey entering in the pro wrestling business.
So, like I said, at that point, I'm still in Wisconsin, and man, wrestling is not, it's not what it is in the South. So, like I said, growing up, everyone would say that stuff's dumb. I don't know why you like it. I came down to Tennessee one time. My brother was living down here, and he said, you've got to come with me to the fairgrounds on Wednesday nights. They do this thing called TNA wrestling. and you just literally never know who's going to show up. And I said, all right, man, that sounds great. Let's go. And I mean, it's over the times of going to those shows. I mean, it's Roddy Piper and Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors and the Sandman from ECW and Raven and the New Age Outlaws. And it was like all these guys that you watched on TV. And now here I am in the arena with a whole lot of people that love this stuff the same way I do. So I come down to Tennessee to visit, and I realize, I could actually have a shot at doing something down here. And even if I don't get a shot at doing something, man, I'm going to get to enjoy a lot of pro wrestling, because it wasn't just TNA at the fairgrounds. There was little independent promotions all over town. At that time, you could go Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and sometimes even on Sundays and see a wrestling show every night of the week. And I was like, this is amazing. This is like a total flip from where I grew up. Like, people down here are like me, they love and respect the hell out of this stuff. This is where I need to be. So I packed up and I moved to Tennessee. And I meet my wife, start a family, and we're going to these wrestling shows. I'm taking my son and my wife, and we're going to all these wrestling shows, getting to see so many amazing superstars and just loving it. And so one time, this is just kind of my luck, as you'll see, the story about getting into radio, the story about getting into podcasting. Sometimes it's all about the timing and a lot to do with luck, because once again, on Craigslist, I find an ad for a local promotion looking for people, and it doesn't exactly say what. So I go, okay, here's my shot. And so I think I talked to somebody, and it's like, okay, come down on this day at this time. It was a Friday night or afternoon, and we'll talk to you. The weekend before, there's a wrestling show at the fairgrounds, and the main event is Jerry the King Lawler versus Sid Vicious. And in Sid Vicious's corner is the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. So knowing what I do about wrestling, just from studying it all those years, I know I need some kind of angle. I can't just go in there and be like, hey, I'm who I am, and this is, and have no idea. I need some kind of angle. So I go to Jimmy Hart at intermission, and the fans, he's giving his autographs and everything. The lights go back down. They go back up on the ring. All the people leave. Jimmy Hart, he's standing there by himself. I slide over to Jimmy Hart, and I go, hey, man, I'm a big wrestling fan. I'm a huge fan of yours. I've been a fan of yours as long as I can remember. I hated you so bad when I was a little kid. And he's like, oh, thank you. So then I say, hey, Jimmy, if I ever have a chance to get into wrestling, I'm from Wisconsin. My friends all say I have a big mouth. Do you think it'd be cool if I called myself the Mouth of the North? And I know in his head, he was probably thinking, you idiot. But what he says is, yeah, sure, baby. God bless. And I go, oh, thank you, Jimmy. You're the best. So then that Friday night when I go out there, I've got that in my pocket. I'm not going to play it unless I feel like I need to. So I meet a couple of dudes that are running this show, and they're like, what can you do? And I go, well, what do you need? And they go, well, what can you do? I said, well, I've got a radio background. I know a lot about wrestling. I'm sure I'd probably be a pretty good commentator. I could sit and call the matches. I could do interviews. I'm not afraid of the camera. I could do these things. And they go, yeah, okay, all right. Well, and I go, hey, my friend Jimmy Hart told me that if I wanted to be known as the Mouth of the North, he was cool with that. I don't know if they thought I was full of it, or if they believed it, or what. But they're like, okay. So then I'm like, all right, what can I do? And they're like, well, just hang out for a minute and we'll let you know. I go, okay. So I'm hanging out. Nobody comes back out. I'm like, oh man, what is happening here? And then people start coming in. So we're in a building. There's a ring in the middle. There was guys working out a minute ago when we were talking. And then they leave. Everybody leaves, and fans start coming in. And I go, what is going on here? Is there a show tonight? And I'm thinking, there's a show tonight. There's people coming in and taking their seats. So I see one of the dudes, and I go up to him. I go, hey, is there a show here tonight? And he goes, yeah. I said, is there anything I can do to help? He says, do you want to ring announce? My brain and my mouth, or I should say my heart and my mouth go, yeah, I'll ring announce. And he goes, all right, come on. And then my brain goes, oh, man, you ain't never done this before. So I go back. They say, okay, you're going to ring announce. I say, okay, I need a paper and a pen. And I'm thinking, how do the guys from WWE do it? You know, how do the big guys, the Howard Finkles, the Dave Penzers, how do they do it? You know, just, okay, I think I can do that. I need a pen and paper. So they give me a pen and paper. I start making my way around the locker room, shaking hands. Hey, my name is Aaron. I'm going to be your ring announcer for the night. What's your name? Where are you from? What about do you weigh? Got any cool nicknames? All right, cool. And I go around, I introduce myself to every single person there. I come back up, I've got everything written down. I look up at the board, I see the lineup of how it's going to go. I go, okay, all right, cool. So then I go out there and I just do my thing. On his way to the ring, weighing in at these many pounds, hailing from this town, it's this guy. And halfway through the night, those guys are looking at me like, holy smokes, where did this guy come from? And so after the show's over, I go up to him, I go, hey, how was that? And they were like, that was amazing. And they hand me an envelope. And I go, what's this? And they go, that's your pay. Can you come back next Friday night? And I was like, oh, yeah, I'll be back here next Friday night. And I go outside and I open it up and there's money inside. And I'm like, I can't believe they're paying me to do this. And that's how I got my start in it. And from there, it was with the Saw promotion, Showtime All-Star Wrestling. They had some pretty big stars in it and some really great matches I got to stand right at ringside for. And then, you know, it just kind of evolves and you go to this promotion for a while and that promotion for a while. And then eventually I end up at Crossfire Wrestling, which is doing big shows at the fairgrounds. And I'm finding myself in the ring with Bret the Hitman Hart. I'm standing in the ring with Roddy Piper, the New Age Outlaws, just all kinds of people. I'm standing in the ring looking at Bret the Hitman Hart going, how is this even real?
And, you know, it's like humble beginnings. You work, you're cutting your teeth, you get to do your, you know, the job of your dreams. You're going out there, meeting all these people that you watched, idolized growing up. It's like heaven.
It's pretty cool, man. It's pretty cool. You know, people always like ask me stuff and make me tell them because I have a regular job, you know, that I go to, and people don't realize that I do all this other stuff. But when they find out, they're pretty blown away by it. And I tell them, you know, yeah, we just got done interviewing Ace Frehley, and yes, I've been in the ring with Bret the Hitman Hart, and you know, to say, and they look at you like, is this guy telling the truth? And it's like, yeah, you know, here I'll show you pictures.
What is like your ultimate goal, like as far as wrestling wise? Do you plan on going to doing more indie shows, wanting to work for a big company? Do you see yourself going in that direction?
Well, I mean, that's when you're young, that's ultimately the goal is to work with the WWE. But somewhere along the line, I think you get to the age where you look at the travel demands of something like that and you go, man, as much as that would be my dream to contribute on the highest of levels, I just don't know if I would want to travel like that all the time. So right now, what I'm doing is because, like I said, once I made my way through different promotions, eventually I got to a promotion called NWA Main Event that was held here in Nashville. And I worked there as a little while as the ring announcer. I got to do a lot of commentary, call the matches. That's always fun. And at some point, I got the opportunity to write the show. And that, my friend, to me, is the ultimate.
Yeah.
To lay out, to think about, you know, you've got two characters. And when I'm talking to somebody that doesn't understand what wrestling is or kind of laughs at it, I try to tell them, you know, think about it as like action theater. Because there's so much going on here, but then because I mean, you got to respect pro wrestlers because, you know, when an actor who's making $1 million movie, when it comes time to do something dangerous, well, they call in the stunt man. But you still got to be a good actor. So as a wrestler, you have to be a good actor. You have to be your own stunt man. You have to be an athlete. You have to have all these things. You have to have the ability to connect with an audience. You know, people don't look at pro wrestling a lot of times the way I do, as the ultimate form of entertainment, because these guys that are doing this out there have to be all these things. They have to be improvisers, because things don't always go according to plan out there. And reactions of the crowd will dictate, you know, changes or things you might do differently than maybe what you had planned out ahead of time. And there's so much to going into what those guys do and to tell the stories, you know, to have an idea with, like, I'll give you an example. And this is going a little bit behind the curtain of what I'm doing right now. And I don't think these guys will mind me telling the story. So right now I'm working for a company called CHW. They run wrestling shows out in Ashland City. A couple of months ago, the owner, Mike Green, called me up and said, hey, would you come out to the show and ring announce and just look it over and tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like. And I said, okay, yeah, I can do that. So I came down there, I did the ring announcing, and then afterwards I talked to him and I said, okay, here's what I think. Because Mike Green knew me from when I was writing for NWA Main Event and really loved the stuff I was doing back then. So when I gave him my thoughts, he said, would you come help us with this? And because Mike Green's such a good guy and a damn good promoter and will get the word out about these shows, I said, you bet I will. I'd be proud to come work with you guys. So one of the things I noticed that night was two guys. One came out and attacked the other one after his match. And sadly, I looked around at the audience trying to gauge the reaction to what this action moment is happening in the ring. Most people really didn't seem to care. And so then once I came into agreement with Mike and I said, hey, you know, I pulled these two guys aside. I said, look, you know, there is only two things we can do here. We get rid of you guys and bring in a couple of dudes that the fans are going to care about, or we can figure out a way to make them care about you. And those guys were like, yeah, man, what do you think? And it was as simple as this. The one guy's from Kentucky. The other guy's from Tennessee. It kind of writes itself. So now we got this guy who's basically a Kentucky supremacist. He hates everything about Tennessee and thinks Kentucky is the best. On the other hand, we got this guy who's named the Kentucky Badass. And he is a straight up fighter, never give up attitude, and he stands up for his family and friends here in Tennessee. And what those guys have been able to do together since we figured out what it was going to be has been just mind-blowing. And right now, 4 shows in since the return of CHW, they are they're the most popular thing going on at the show right now. You know, there's guys that everybody considers to be bigger stars than them, but as far as fan investment into what they're doing, they really love the Tennessee Badass and they really hate the Kentucky Iceman. And it's really working, but it's because those guys were able to take a simple idea and bring it to life in a big way to where them fans are immediately latched into what they're doing. And to me, to have a part in that, to help, find the idea that these guys can do to make it work is, I mean, it's so satisfying.
You have to really get people invested in the storylines and what's going on. Otherwise, they're not going to care about what's going on. I mean, that's why characters like Stone Cold Steve Austin are so relatable to the crowd, because they want to see this, you know, everyday American beer drinker who beats up his boss, you
Right.
know.
How many 450 splashes did you ever see Stone Cold Steve Austin do? 0, because he didn't have to do that stuff.
No, it's always about finding what works, what's connecting, what's relatable to your audience, and making them care and go, oh my gosh, can you believe he just did that? They
100%.
just did that?
It's the story, it's the characters. You got to be able to relate to the characters. Everybody's got their favorite wrestlers. For whatever reason, whatever guys you like, you relate to them. You like them. You think they're cool. And so you want to root for them. You want to see them do good. And then there's guys you watch and go, man, that guy, man, I hate that guy. But that's them doing their jobs too. If they can make make you love them, or make you hate them, it doesn't matter. Either way, it's a reaction, and that's what's important.
Do you watch the current product at all? And if so, who are some of your favorites?
Let's see. I do watch the current product. I try to keep up with it. Um, my favorite thing for a long time was the Alpha Academy. I loved Chad Gable and Otis. I loved what their characters were. And maybe it's because I'm a Wisconsin guy that I can relate with northern dudes like that. But I just thought they were funny, but still believable. Otis looks like he could kill somebody. Chad Gable obviously could tear somebody apart with his hands, with his, wrestling abilities, his Olympic style wrestling abilities. He's like a mini Kurt Angle. Those are my favorite. Those are my two favorite guys really in WWE. And I'm always sad because I don't feel like they're doing enough. It's like, oh man, where are my guys? But I mean, I love the bloodline story that's going on because man, that's been going on for a long time.
It
I love,
has.
I love seeing stories run the long haul because that's some investment right there. Because then it gives you and it gives the WWE the opportunity to sprinkle in clues here and there. And I love clues when I'm writing stuff. Because when I write something, I think about where it's going to end up. And then I figure out how it's going to get there. And if I know where it's going to end up, I can sprinkle little clues along the way so that when it finally happens, people go, oh, yeah, now it makes so much sense. That's why this happened. And that's why he did that. And that's why that dude said this. And that's why she reacted that way because it's been this all along. It's
Exactly.
awesome. It's
Yeah.
awesome. And to be able to sit back to write something out and then sit back behind the crowd and wait for that moment to happen. And then the moment happens and the crowd reacts just the way you knew they would. Whew, that gets me, man. That gets me right in my heart. It makes me feel so good.
Yes, and the energy too. The crowd is just what makes the shows. That real energy, they want to be surprised at what happens because it's that unpredictability that anything can happen feel that I feel like is so vital and essential to pro wrestling. It really is.
Now, we've got to talk a lot about me, but I want to tell you a little something about you, Stanley. I've been checking out some of your stuff, and I see that you, like me, are also following the dream and loving the art and creating the art. You've done some pretty dang cool interviews.
Thank
So
you.
I was just listening to the Henry O. Godwin one. That was pretty great. And I think
Thank
my
you.
favorite about what you're doing is because, there's a lot of people out there interviewing wrestlers, but your angle is different. I love that you ask them about the charitable things that they've done because a lot of the interviews they do, they want to know, hey, what were you thinking about when this happened at that match in 1994? But when you ask them about, the interactions they have, because being a pro wrestler and any kind of entertainer is about touching lives, and how better of a way to understand who a person really is than asking them about stuff like that to really truly know who they are and how much it meant to them to touch the lives, especially of kids, that are sick and things like that. It's given me a whole new appreciation for wrestlers that I highly admired already, but have gained even another level of admiration for because you brought out a side of them that I've never seen before. And I appreciate you for doing a show like this.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because, pro wrestling, I feel like over the years, we've just heard so much about the negativity, the dark side of the rings and all these other things, that we hear about, and they are just, there's you hear all these things and it's just so unfortunate, but when I feel like over the years we don't really hear a lot of the good side, the good stuff, because there's a lot of good sides to the business as well, and that's something I wanted to touch on with this show and with this podcast, and there's so much that I'd like to do with this, and it means a lot that you would say that because I appreciate that very much because I think this is we need I feel like we need something like this to show people like wrestlers are human beings too. They care about people, they care about certain causes, and the more we can spread awareness of that, I think the more I feel like the better off the industry will be.
Sure, man, you're shining a positive light on it when it's so much easier to shine the negative light. People love to read the dirt, but it's good to see the positive side of things too. Who was your favorite interview that you've done?
Oh man, I've had so many. So in the last couple of years, I really enjoyed interviewing Stevie Ray of Harlem Heat was really good. Booker T's brother. I'd love to have his Booker on as well at some point. I enjoyed interviewing Victoria.
Right.
Uh, she was great. That was a fun interview. Um, I had Teddy Long on. That was really fun. That was really great.
Oh,
Um, who did I have on? I've had so
I
many.
like I like the one you did with Al Snow. It was really good too, I thought.
Thank you.
And I want to show you one of my most prized possessions right here. The
How'd you
Al
get?
Snow head, autographed and signed up by Al Snow himself
Nice.
in a
Yeah.
crossfire locker room. I was in a thrift store one day and I saw that thing sitting up on the shelf and I looked up at it and I said to my wife, I was like, that's the real thing right there. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, that mannequin head, that's the head. That's the actual one that Al Snow used to use. I mean, it's the exact same thing. I
That's
was like,
so
I'm buying
amazing.
it. I'm buying it. And she's like, you got to be kidding me. I said, I'm buying it because someday I know eventually I'm going to find myself working a show where I'm sharing a locker room with Al Snow and call it into being. Eventually it happened and I knew it was happening. So I brought that head with me and I had him sign it up for me. And
And
I keep it up on my shelf. I love it. When people that don't know about wrestling see it, I always see them like side eyeing it, like, what the hell is that?
it's so crazy. I think it's amazing, the work that he has done with OVW and has really just brought it, catapulted it to new heights, with the Wrestlers documentary on Netflix and everything that he's doing right now. It's amazing to see, the work he's done. So that's really awesome. But I
Well, I,
want to
I went up to Louisville not too long ago and visited a good friend of mine, and he said, let's go to the OVW show. And it had been a long time since I just sat in the crowd as a fan. And you know what? It really kind of rekindled my love for wrestling a little bit because I had a really good time at that show. They had guys like Jack Vaughn were there, and he's amazing. And Al was in the story, and had the Basham brother was in there, and I just had a blast. And it's like, man, you think about that. OVW has been around for so long. And here's Al Snow in 2024, still putting on these really great shows.
And the thing about OVW that I just find just so fascinating is that it really was a training ground, and it still is a training ground for so many up and coming and future stars. I mean, think about it: John Cena,
Yeah,
Batista,
yeah.
Brock Lesnar, Shelton Benjamin, Randy Orton. The list goes on and on. And to see the cream of the crop really rise in OVW, I mean, that's just hats off to the crew there for being able to continue to put on a great product.
Yeah, there was guys I saw there that night that I said, that guy's probably going to be in WWE one day. So
Yeah.
I mean, that tradition continues up there.
And I think the thing is like there's so many great companies now. Wrestling I feel like is really in a hot period. With WWE, still the juggernaut. They're going to Netflix soon, and you got AEW. Back wrestling is back on the Turner networks.
Right?
Who would have thought that, 20 years ago we'd be saying wrestling was back on TNT and TBS. Um, we got NWA, they're still kicking butt. We've got New Japan making waves in the US. All the companies, Impact is still thriving, TNA
Yeah.
is still thriving. So
some really good stuff right now.
So, I mean, you've got wrestling on at your fingertips now. It's so accessible. You just go on, not even just with your television, but you could go online and check this stuff out. I mean, 20 years ago, we had maybe one, maybe two companies if you're lucky, and maybe some of the independents, but you got so much wrestling now to watch.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is.
And most importantly, I always remind everybody, go support your local pro wrestling events. When you see that there's a show in your town or there's a company that's putting on events in your area, go see it live. I mean, when you're talking about a wrestling show, you're talking about 3 hours of hot action live entertainment for a fraction of the price if you try to take your family or friends to a movie.
And the thing is like there's nothing like going to see wrestling live in general because the atmosphere, it's different from television.
Oh yeah.
It really is. There's this excitement, you know. So yeah, definitely support the local wrestling venues. You know, we need them. We definitely need them around. I want to switch back and talk about you. Thank you again for the praise. I want to switch back to you and what you've done. You've been involved with a lot of different charity organizations as part of wrestling. I want to touch on that. I know you've been very involved with Make-A-Wish. And what made you want to let's talk about how you got involved with that.
Well, at the time, there was a new company starting up in Nashville called Crossfire. And basically, what this ended up being was they were doing these shows down at the fairgrounds, which was the historic building in Nashville that was built for professional wrestling way back in the day by Nick Goulas. And it's gone now. They tore it down. That was a sad day. They put up the soccer stadium in its place. But man, I'm sure glad I got to experience it. When I first came to town and was going to those TNA shows down at the fairgrounds, I tell my brother, I'm gonna work this. I'm gonna work in this building someday. I'm gonna find a way to do something. We'd look at Jeremy Borash, who was doing the ring announcing at TNA at the time, and I was like, I know I could do that. You know, I know I could do something like that. I'm gonna do it here someday. And eventually, when Crossfire came to be, I got that opportunity. That's where I got to be in the ring with Mick Foley and Bret Hart, Roddy Piper, and all those guys. One of the coolest aspects of Crossfire Wrestling was that they were very closely involved with Make-A-Wish of Tennessee. And what that meant was that there was always an entire section of the crowd that was roped off and saved for children that were a part of that. And so what you're looking at here is kids that are fighting for their lives and are struggling. And they're just little kids, man. It's heartbreaking. But to put them in their seats with their families and let them forget about everything going on in their lives, you know, the battles, the struggles, all that, to let them forget about it for 3 hours and watch this epic wrestling show with 4,000 to 5,000 other fans in attendance with them, and to be in the middle of the ring and be a part of that, it was outstanding. It was outstanding. I was so proud to be able to help with that. My friend Bubba Perry had a big part in the Make-A-Wish of Middle Tennessee, and a huge part in getting those kids to be there. And honestly, I look back at it now and I could totally feel it at the time that those kids were the heart and the soul and the spirit of that whole promotion. Like, them being there raised everybody up a little bit more. So all they were going through, you'd say, well, whatever's going on ain't nothing compared to that. You know, we have to give these kids something spectacular. We need to go above and beyond to show these kids the time of their lives here tonight. And we would do all kinds of cool stuff with them. There is a wrestler named Chris Michaels that is a pretty dang well-known name around here. And I remember one time he was wrestling Kid Cash. And I, not too long ago, got to tell him this story for the first time. And it meant something to him. So sometimes what I would do, because I'm ring announcing, I'd grab the ring bell and I'd get into the kids in the section with the kids, and I'd sit down by a couple of them and I'd let them ring the bell to start the match, to end the match. So I'd say, okay, you know, we got to watch for the referee. When he goes like this, Ding, ding, you hit it. You ready? All right, here he goes. There he is. And that kid would ding, ding the bell. Then I'd move over to the next one. I go, okay, now we got to watch when the ref 1, 2, 3 calls for the bell. You got to hit it. Ding, ding, ding. And I'd let that kid do it. So I sat down to this little girl. She's got a nose tube in, got her little tank next to her and everything. You know, you tell her she's in her, limited time she's been on Earth. Just a little bit of time she's been here. She's probably been through more than bad times than I ever have in all my old ass years of being here. And so the cool thing about this that night was I knew, because I know who's going to win the match, but she don't know who's going to win the match. So it's Kid Cash. He's the bad guy. Everybody hates Kid Cash. And Chris Michaels. And everybody's cheering for him. Everybody wants to see him give it to the loudmouth Kid Cash and get a big victory. I know how the match is going to end. So I'm talking to her. And as we're talking, we're watching the match together. We're watching wrestling together like a couple of old friends. And I say, man, Kid Cash is beating him up. And she's like, I don't like that. And so Kid Cash is just putting the boots to him, just beating him and beating him, beating him. And I said to her, if I know anything about Chris Michaels, is that no matter how bad this gets, he's not going to give up. And she's like, yeah. I said, boy, it's not looking good, is it? It's not looking good. And she's like, no, it's not looking good. I was like, he's not going to give up. He's not going to give up. And then as the match progresses, Chris Michaels wins the match. I say, there it is. 1, 2, 3. The referee gives signal. She rings the bell. And I say to her, just like Chris Michaels, if you don't give up, you can win if you don't give up. And it was moments like that, I'm in the ring with Bret the Hitman Hart. But honestly, that don't mean nothing to me looking back as compared to a moment like that. And then, to see Bret the Hitman Hart, as I bring him up, I brought him up because that night he was there was just out of this world. I remember walking in, there's Bret Hart. He's leaned on the guardrail. He's talking to the kids in the Make-A-Wish section. There's no cameras there, no local news channels. Nobody's taking pictures. It's real. Bret Hart really cares about these kids. He's taking the time to talk to them, even though there's nobody there to celebrate him doing this thing. He's doing it because he's got a heart and he cares. That made me respect him so much to go because sometimes you would see it with guys, and I'm not going to mention names, but they would give those kids attention as long as News Channel 5 was standing right there. But most of them didn't. Most of them really honestly cared and gave their time and would talk to those kids and give them encouragement. One of the greatest things, maybe the greatest thing that I've ever been involved in pro wrestling was I got to be a part of a Piper's Pit at the fairgrounds in Nashville. And you think, wow, what's Piper going to talk about? He's a loose cannon, he's wild. He could say anything. Unpredictable Roddy Piper. You think you know the answers, Roddy Piper changes the questions. But this night, Roddy Piper had just come back from fighting cancer. And his doctors all told him, you're a dead man. You're not going to beat this. Your chances of beating this are so slim. But he did. He found a way to do it. And so the Piper's Pit ends up being, it's almost like it was silent in the ring because everybody was quiet. You got this whole audience of people and this little section of Make-A-Wish kids, and Piper's talking to them. And he's not talking about kicking somebody's butt. He's not talking about, anything going on in the wrestling part of it. He's talking to those kids. And what he's telling those kids is, the doctors came to me and they told me I was going to die. They told me there was no way that I was going to beat the cancer that was eating me up on the inside. Everybody told me I was going to die. But you know what? I didn't believe them. And I fought, and I believed that I was going to get better. And eventually, you know what? I did. And Piper's crying, and I'm crying, and there's people in the audience that are crying, and them little kids are looking up at him like he's Superman. And I go, this is beautiful. This is what it's all about. That's probably my favorite moment. And I've got to do a lot of cool things in wrestling. But man, that's got to be my favorite moment right there because it transcended being at a wrestling show. It was like, oh, it was almost like an out of body experience because it's like there's a wrestling show going on, but yet we're kind of floated above that and on a different plane where it's like he's talking to these kids and they're so zoned in on what he's doing. I feel like Piper had to have saved lives that night. He had to have given inspiration that helped some of those kids, and obviously, some of those kids didn't make it over the years, but I know for a fact some of them did. And I got to believe in my heart that Roddy Piper doing that night saved some of those kids' lives.
It's amazing. Roddy Piper's like the ultimate heel, right? Back in the day, the
Yeah.
80s, was like the classic bad guy, the villain, But that night, when, being a part of that special moment, I mean, you truly saw the human side of Roddy Piper come out. It seemed like it was very emotional.
100%. And going into that show, it's like, wow, Roddy Piper, what's he going to be like? You like worry, you think, wow, this guy is, known as one of the biggest villains in wrestling history. What's he going to be like in real life? The nicest people I've ever met in all my life. He was so cool. They did a meet and greet thing where the line went on forever. And when time was up, Roddy Piper said, no, I'm going to meet everybody. And what was cool about it was like, so there were some people you were allowed to bring two things to get autographed. And if you brought anything more than that, you had to pay for it because of people getting stuff signed and just reselling it. So like there were people in line that had garbage bags full of stuff and they had to give him like, I'll sign the first two things for free. After that, it's $20 a pop. And they'd have him sign their whole bag full of stuff. And so he didn't have nobody to keep track of his money while this was happening. So the promoter, Marcus, asked me, he's like, hey, your wife's here, right? I said, yeah, she's here. Would she be willing to help out Roddy Piper? And I said, oh, I'm sure she would. Let me ask her. And she said, oh, I'll totally do that. And so then, I'm busy getting ready for the show. So I don't get to see none of that. And she comes back later and tells me, he is the nicest man that you could ever imagine. He would take his Hall of Fame ring off and let little kids wear it in the picture. She said he talked to each kid. How's school going? what are your favorite classes? Are you playing sports? What do you like? And he would take the time to really have a personal moment with each person in line. It wasn't autograph next, like you see so many times with Piper. And like I said, time ran out. Like, hey, you're supposed to stop now and get in the back because we're getting ready for the show. Piper's like, hey, I'm sorry. There's still 25 more people here, and I'm going to meet every one of them. They stood in line this whole time to meet me. I'm not cutting out just because you're telling me my time's up. So yeah, just the nicest guy you could ever want to meet. Roddy Piper was amazing.
Yeah, it definitely seems like an unforgettable moment.
Yeah.
What is it about giving back to the community that gives you the most joy?
Well, I mean, being a rock and roller and a wrestling guy, you don't really talk about your faith and things like that so much. People aren't really interested in all that. But I know for myself, I can tell you that every day I start my day and I ask the Lord to allow me to be a light that shines his love onto everyone I come into contact with. And by saying that out loud and asking for that gift and that ability, you got to do your part to carry through on it. And so that's something I do every day. I ask that because it inspires me to be the best person I can be, to be nice to everybody that I come in contact with, to help anybody I can in any way that I can, and it's a gift in itself, to be able to touch lives. I mean, when you're in entertainment, you're in it for the reason that you like to entertain people. You like to give people good feelings, and so it comes natural that a lot of people in entertainment are very charitable people, are very good people that are doing it, I mean, obviously there's the ones that aren't, but I got to believe a lot of them, like me, want to help people and want to touch lives and make a positive impact on people in any way you possibly can do it. You know, over the years, I've done countless volunteer wrestling shows to help out a family who's had a close member pass away, or have somebody who's been in an accident and needs the help, or they funeral costs and things like that. It's tough times that we live in right now, and when you have a tragedy in your life, it can feel like you're alone. But then through the power of wrestling, through the power of entertainment, through the power of love, great things can come of that. I've worked at wrestling shows that, like, you work a regular show with some big stars, you're like, oh, this is going to be something. And then you do the benefit show where it's like all local people doing it, and the attendance is doubled the big show you were just at, because wrestling fans are big-hearted people. If they see something that they believe in, or they feel like they can help where help is needed or deserved, or whatever, they're going to come out, they're going to step up every single time. And that blows me away about wrestling fans. It makes me proud to be a pro wrestling guy, because pro wrestling fans are generally really, really good people, and they'll step up for a cause anytime you got one. And, growing up in a place in a time when wrestling was kind of looked down upon, kind of like how you do your thing with this, it, like you said, it elevates the whole thing. There's a lot of negative stuff in this world, but if we can take this beautiful art form that is pro wrestling and use it not just to touch lives in an entertaining way, but in a meaningful way, you can't beat it. What more can you ask for? I mean, entertainment, helping people, it all goes hand in hand. I love it. It gives me the opportunity to help more people, and I like that a lot.
Absolutely. Well, Aaron, this has been wonderful getting the chance to speak with you. I just want to say thank you for coming on the show. It means a lot to me, to my listeners, and to my viewers that are watching this on YouTube. Where can people find more about you, your podcast, and how to get in touch with you?
Okay, well, as we found out about your old pal Aaron Camaro, there's a lot. So you want to check out the Decibel Geek Podcast if you're a fan of hard rock and classic metal music. We just did our 600th episode all about the band Rat, and it was a lot of fun. People loved it, and that's what it's all about. Along with that, how we connected, Rockin' Pod. Rockin' Pod's coming up on April 11th through the 13th of 2025 at the Nashville Fairgrounds. Basically, what you're going to find there is music podcasters from all over the world come to Nashville. And then we're going to set up rock and roll vendors that are going to sell albums, CDs, posters, music memorabilia. So you're going to have a chance to meet your favorite rock podcasters, music podcasters. You're going to find all your favorite shopping things all brought right there for you. We're bringing in the rock stars. Every year, we've brought in rock stars. And so you're going to get to see your favorite rock stars getting interviewed live in front of a studio audience up on the stage. You're going to get to see your favorite podcasters talking to your favorite rock stars. It's a big old rock and roll party. It's a lot of fun. And in all the years past that we've done it, it's been a blast every single time. I'm really looking forward to 2025. Announcements about the guests are right upon us. So if this sounds like a party you want to attend in April next year, right here in Nashville, look it up, rockinpod.com. You're going to start seeing announcements coming up for that. I know that this thing gathers the coolest rock stars. They want to be a part of something like this because it's so much fun. And you just get to mingle with people that you never thought you'd get to mingle with because you listen to their records and now you're hanging out with them. And it's all a big party where everybody's getting along and everybody's having a good time. Stanley, I got to get you out to CHW Wrestling in Ashland City one of these weekends.
Yeah,
when we do
I'd love
it.
to.
You gotta come see it. I will put you on the list. You let me know when you're coming, and I'll get you in the door, guaranteed. This coming up, we got December 21st. We've got the retirement match of Lawrence the Sharp Dressed Man. Now, Lawrence is very, very well known and respected as he's a Tennessee legend. He's a guy that's been wrestling around here for over 30 years. Talk about a guy who's touched lives. He's done it. Now, he's having his final match on December 21st. So if you're a wrestling fan watching this and you know who I'm talking about, this is your last chance to ever see Lawrence the Sharp Dressed Man wrestle again. This is it, and it's over. And we thought, man, how do we top that? Well, we've got a CHW Heavyweight Championship belt that nobody's wearing. So I said, you know what? That match with Lawrence is going to be huge. He's taking on his longtime arch nemesis, Mikey Dunn, in the main event, but we need something big to go along with that. So what bigger than a one-night, 8-man tournament to crown a new CHW heavyweight champion? 8 men begin. It goes down to 2, but only 1 can walk away with the championship. So all those matches are going to come down. We're going to crown a new champion. We're going to celebrate the career of Lawrence the Sharp Dressed Man. And that all goes down in Ashland City. It's CHW Wrestling, December 21st. Look it up on your social media. I know it's all over Facebook. Join the group and follow the page and get all the information on that and come join us. It's going to be one heck of a show.
Definitely seems like it is. And you're also on social media as well if people want to reach you.
I'm Aaron Camaro. If you want to know more about me, heck, send me a friend request. I'll look you up and go, okay, this is a rock and roller. We've got mutual friends, or this is a wrestling fan. We've got mutual friends. I'll accept your friendship. I just got done deleting a bunch of people that I thought weren't real, and so now I got room again.
All right. Well, Aaron, thanks again, and you're more than welcome to come back.
Awesome, Stanley. I sure do appreciate you having me on. This has been a blast, and like I said, I appreciate what you're doing, shining a positive light on pro wrestling, because, man, it needs it. We need more positivity in this world. That's why I love pro wrestling. I love rock and roll. I love entertaining, and I love having fun. And this has been a lot of fun. So Thanks for having me on. Wrestling with Heart, rock and roll.
Absolutely. Take care. This is Wrestling with Heart. I hope you found this podcast to be informative and entertaining. If you did, please hit the subscribe button and look out for the next edition.